I can see you behind the screen there. Okay. Oh, we've got a green light. Well, good morning, everybody. It is February 5th, 2026, 7:32 in the morning, and this is the Housing Redevelopment Authority meeting, following on the heels of our City Council meeting last night that ended before the 5th of February, but not much before. These meetings are being conducted in a hybrid fashion. I think we've talked about that. Some people are watching remotely. They can call in for public comment if they so desire. And we don't have any public hearing this morning, so that'll be the only opportunity. If it's something on the agenda this morning or scheduled for a future public hearing, those topics are off limits. Otherwise, call in with any concerns that you've got or express them from the audience. We have a few of our fellow residents here this morning. And having provided that information, I'll call the meeting to order and ask Manager Neal, our Executive Director Neal, and with that hat on, to call the roll.
Thank you, Your Honor. Commissioner Risser.
Here.
Commissioner Jackson.
Here.
Commissioner Pierce. Here. Commissioner Agnew.
Here.
Chair Hupland.
Here. Pledge of Allegiance is next.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm just looking at Jennifer Benarott and thinking we should give her the Employee of the Year award just for, did you even go home last night, or did you sleep in the office, or? Well, you're remarkably chipper this morning for that short night you had. The rest of us thought it was plenty short. All right, we've got a meeting agenda. Is there a motion to approve the meeting agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion by Commissioner Jackson, second by Commissioner Pierce to adopt the meeting agenda. Any further discussions with regard to that topic? All those in favor of adopting the meeting agenda as published, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried. We have a meeting agenda, something to work from. Now it is community comment time. I'm going to put the numbers up on the screen just in case we have anybody calling in. If they can get that information up there, and then ask if there's anyone in the audience that wishes to address the HRA on a matter of concern to them that's not on the agenda this evening or scheduled for a future public hearing. I think I forgot to do that last night and had that young woman come up who wanted to talk about guns. And
you said it.
Yeah, but thanks to your prompt, because I was talking to Scott and having that sidebar. Anyway, nobody coming up from the audience. Do we have anybody online?
I don't yet have anyone on the line, but because there is a brief delay in the broadcast, I'd recommend we give people about a minute or so to call in. My clock shows that it's 7:36. I'll come back to you at 7:37 or when I have a caller, whichever's first.
Okay. Yeah, don't pause too long. Yeah, or check on you to see if you're even awake. That's a good point.
I got my contacts in today, people, so we're strong. It is now 7:37, and I still don't have a caller, so I think it's safe for me to move forward with the agenda.
Okay, thanks for that. Executive Director Neal, anything to report out on from the prior meeting?
There is not.
All right. Next thing is the consent agenda, a singular item on the consent agenda. Is there a motion to adopt the HRA minutes of January 15, 2026?
So moved. Second.
Commissioner Jackson moves. Commissioner Agnew seconds the adoption of the HRA minutes from January 15, 2026. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of those the HRA minutes from January 15, 2026, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Those HRA minutes from January 15, 2026 are adopted. Let's go now to the kind of the heart of the meeting, and that is a reminder of what we do with tax increment financing and the goals that we have relative to it. Our executive, our economic development manager, Bill Neuendorf, has this matter, and may have some input on the next matter as well. So, good
Yes.
morning.
Good morning. So this is really the heart and soul of this HRA meeting this morning. I wanted to pick up where we left off several months ago. You had asked that staff take a look into the policy regarding tax increment financing and provide a forum and an opportunity for you all to discuss, are we using it in the best way possible? Are there better ways to use it, different ways to use it, no ways to use it? We started the conversation, I believe, sometime last summer, and then we went through the presentation in September, and we ran out of time to really have a robust conversation about that. So this morning I was going to just briefly walk through the presentation, more like run through the presentation, and then have an opportunity for you guys to have your discussion. Happy to answer questions. I don't have a lot of additional data at this point, but really an opportunity for you to identify any questions, concerns that we should dive into in the future. So with that, I'll run through this. This is the same presentation that was delivered in September of 2025. And as you mentioned then, TIF has been a viable tool in Minnesota for 50-some years. It's been used in Edina since 1974. A lot of the major projects in our community were funded with TIF. Roads, bridges, Centennial Lakes, parking garages, 50th in France, Grandview, Edinburgh Park. A lot of the whole Centennial Lakes development, from the retail to the office to the park itself, was all supported in different ways with TIF. More currently, we have about a dozen current TIF districts that support a wide variety of projects, from infrastructure to private investment to public infrastructure to affordable housing. In 2022, we rewrote the TIF policy altogether. For many years, like many communities, there was kind of an unwritten TIF policy. You worked with the best practice and you use flexible approaches to get it done. In around 2010, Edina adopted a pretty simplified but effective policy. But in 2022, we decided to be a little bit more robust in that policy, and it was rewritten altogether to write down a lot of those best practices and protections that we provide in every TIF negotiation, but to put them in writing as something that we must do. And I distilled it down to 5 questions. We talked a little bit about whether city policy is driving the need to use TIF. The second one is whether or not there's a preferred order and timing to consider TIF. And I think that's one that we might want to have further discussion on. We also talked about Edina's budget pillars and values and how those can be incorporated. Whether TIF should be used only for specific types of costs, and whether the strategy of using TIF should be modified more dramatically to be programmatic rather than on a case-by-case basis. So those are the way that we laid out the original conversation. I'm not going to go through all the additional detail. Happy to if you have questions. But we had talked about a lot of the costs that do influence a development project, and certainly entitlement costs, foregone revenue from affordable units certainly makes a dramatic impact to someone's budget. Regarding the order and timing of TIF, this is one that I think we might want to talk about a little bit further. But today we intentionally separate the city council having a zoning conversation, because that's their role, that's their statutory role, is zoning conversations. And then separately, the HRA has funding conversations. So we've taken the approach that we initially get the zoning done, and if it passes that zoning test, and it looks like it actually could happen, then we talk about funding. In the past, you've expressed a desire to flip those two, because they really go hand in hand. Every project needs zoning and funding. If they have one but not the other, it's still a dead project. And so one of the easiest ways to flip that order is to talk about the financing first, just so that you're well aware of that need. We typically have done that in the past, but we've just touched on it. But that's something we can certainly talk about in more detail. There's another more complicated process that delivers the same outcome with a lot more complexity. I just called it the alternate. I don't know if we need to go there necessarily, but that order and timing is something we can consider. And then with our budget pillars and our budget values, staff has been trying to incorporate those into more and more of our expense decision-making and where we invest our tax dollars. And certainly we can continue to have those conversations. And regarding the type of things, expenses that TIF can be used to pay for, those are regulated by state law. Using Edina's best practice, we follow state law, but we're actually a little bit more stringent than state law allows. We found that some expenses, while they're allowable in the state code, we don't really think they're necessary here. But I would still encourage us that flexibility is key. Every project is different, and that's one of the nice things about the TIF policy and the TIF law is that it is flexible. I mean, there's clear guardrails, but it allows staff and you all as decision makers to be flexible to address changing needs for changing times. And the final thing we talked about was whether or not we should rethink our use of tax increment financing altogether, rather than considering it on a case-by-case basis, as we've done, I would argue, highly effectively for 50-some years. We could come up with a special program, TIF for affordable housing, TIF for public roads and public plazas, TIF for redevelopment infrastructure. While that's more predictable, the challenge is that once you lure that carrot in front of a developer, they're going to apply for it. And so I think our request for TIF would increase. And we've never proactively offered TIF, at least in my time here. We've always used it in response to a failure in the marketplace or a gap in the marketplace. So while this would be a more delineated process, I think it would result in the increased use of TIF, and I try to use TIF as minimal as possible. So that's all the topics that we covered, and I turn it back to you, Mr. Chair, for discussion and questions.
All right, thank you. Yeah, from my colleagues, I ask if you have any questions or comments, questions for Mr. Neuendorf or questions for staff generally, or thoughts about should we have TIF as a tool? How should it be used if we do have it as a tool? More programmatic, more flexible, is some of the questions that Manager Neuendorf has raised. I think we know that it represents about 1.6% of our tax base, if my memory serves me correctly, and so compared to other cities, we don't use it much, and we've been pretty cautious in its use. So I don't know if folks have thoughts. Commissioner Agnew is going to lead us off this morning.
Thank you. Yeah, happy to.
The youngest and most resilient of all of us is going to lead off.
Happy to get started. I might not go line by line and answer all the questions, but some of my immediate thoughts are, I really continue to value TIF as a tool within our toolbox that we can elect to use for specific limited projects across the community. Limited being, what I think the mayor just said of, looking at the totality of how we're using it is still pretty reserved. And so a couple of things, I could see even implementing like a maximum of not to exceed, 3% of the tax base or something like that, just to make sure that we're kind of thinking about what seems reasonable to not go over. The only other change I do want to actually make at this time is regarding timing. There have been a couple of times where I felt like I wasn't made aware of or knew that a specific project needed TIF funding, TIF financing until it felt later in the process. And I think it's important as we're making decisions to be able to evaluate on the totality, and the way we kind of break it up right now doesn't make as much sense to me. So that's the one thing I for sure want to see us talk about and potentially change. But otherwise, I do value it. I don't think that it's being overused. I think you present some interesting ideas of, should we have something that's specific to affordable housing and the like. I'm open to more discussion. Right now, my reaction is it seems to be working pretty well. I don't know that we need to necessarily pivot, but I welcome the discussion. So thank you.
Thanks for those lead-off comments. Member Pierce, Councilor, Commissioner?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So one question, in one of the slides, you said we limit the size and duration of TIF. What does that mean?
Sure. So a good example, so the size of a TIF district, up at 44th and France, we created a small TIF district where the Lorient Apartments was built. There was a push at that time to include the entire intersection.
Okay.
And we ended up creating a TIF district that I think is 1 acre.
Yeah.
There was a push to make it about 5 acres in hopes that something else might happen. My professional preference is to use TIF when you know something is very likely to happen, rather than hoping for it to happen. So we only created the TIF boundaries to include that 1 parcel, rather than hoping to include more. That, I believe, protects the surrounding tax bases.
Okay.
For the city, the school, et cetera. Also in that case, the TIF law allows TIF districts to be established for anywhere from 8 to up to 25, 26 years. In that particular case, the developer asked for a 25-year TIF district. We ran their numbers. They didn't need 25 years. So we created a 15-year district, which would return the full base to the taxing agencies much, much faster. Again, the developer wasn't so happy with our decision, but by our analysis, we independently analyzed their numbers. They didn't need that much, and we wanted to protect our community. So that's how we established the duration and the size.
And so is that, no, you answered it, okay. So I don't have any issue with using TIF as a tool. My challenge is, because you can't argue or debate that enormous tax capacity, that these districts have not created enormous tax capacity for the community and benefit, right? I think for me, the challenge is I'd like to see that financial benefit go into the general fund or wherever those dollars are intended to go sooner than they do. So the comment of size, if you're talking about boundary, get it, all right, that makes sense. Duration, 25 years seems not limited to me, right? That seems like a long time for that, to restrict those funds from, right? That seems like a long time to me. 15 years seems like a long time. Now, if you tell me, well, James, it takes 3 years to do a project, and so relatively speaking, in that context, 10 to 15 years is not a long time. Okay, I get that. But my only ask is that we try to figure out a way that we can accelerate getting that tax capacity back to the general fund. However we can do that is the only, that's the only question or concern that I have with how we're using it.
Great.
How about the timing issue that Kate mentioned? Has that been an issue for you at all? You'd like to know about it sooner, or the potential use of it sooner?
I would like to know about the potential use of it sooner. for sure, that would be beneficial. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, Commissioner Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So actually, now I have three things, and I'll tell you all three of them, and but they're different. So first of all, in your end-of-the-year report last time, you talked about the history of TIF going back to 1974, and you had a quote, which I was unaware of, that it looks like we've been using TIF the same way consistently for nearly 50 years. And I'd like to just kind of review that again. The second question is, again, unrelated. It feels like using TIF for land price is a circular process, that because there's TIF available, they can spend more on the land price, and how, with accelerating land prices, both for housing and for retail, we're really a very expensive place to do business or to be. And I want to explore a little bit how the use of TIF for land prices inflates the land price. And that kind of goes to the timing question too, which I agree with my colleagues that it's probably a good idea to flip that middle part where we can know that TIF is in the discussion before we make the zoning decision, because I have been surprised by that, saying, oh, okay, well, we passed the zoning of this. Oh, wait a minute, now you want money. And I didn't like being surprised on that. And then my third question kind of goes to what Member Pierce was saying, and that is the duration of these TIF districts, that I'd like to kind of understand how the duration of the TIF district then affects our ability to pool TIF dollars for affordable housing. And it seems to me that maybe we've done that, and I'd just like a little clarification on that pooling for affordable housing beyond the specific project that we have given TIF to. So those are my three questions, and you can answer them in the order you like.
All right, great, thank you. So regarding the history, I'm an expert historian for the last 15 to 20 years. For the last 26 or 25 to 35 years, I'm pretty good. Beyond that, I'm making some best guesses. I don't know any specifics about what we did in the 1970s or early 80s. But looking at the outcomes, I know that we've used TIF since 1974. We've used it primarily, especially in the recent decades, as a reimbursement, where we work hand in hand with a private developer. They make a proposal, get a project going. We use TIF as a reward, so to speak. It's not a reward, but it's upon completion, we give them the TIF note. So it keeps all the financial risk in their court. If they fail to deliver, they don't get a penny from the city. If they fail to build a project, they don't even get a TIF note. So we've used that predominantly for decades. In the earliest days, we used TIF as a public finance tool to build the public roads at Centennial Lakes. Remember, that was a gravel pit. There weren't roads. So I'm presuming that the city funded and issued debt, pledging TIF as the collateral, to build those roads, to get something started, to convert that gravel pit into office and retail and homes, luxury homes, affordable homes, and a park. We did something similar with the parking garages at 50th and France, where we pledged TIF, issued city debt to build public parking garages, and then had all the private development happen to pay it to create the tax increment. So in those earliest days, I would say that Edina was riskier. We were bolder because we had a clean slate, and there wasn't a lot happening at the Hedberg gravel pit other than gravel. But as we've matured as a community, we've been more cautious. We've also become, our commercial areas have become much more desirable, where the city doesn't have to be as bold. So we've used TIF in a variety of ways, but for the last several decades, the TIF note and reimbursing the developer for delivering what they promised is how we've preferred to use it, and that still is our preference. It's not the only way, but it's the preferred way.
So that's a very good answer on how. My question actually went to why.
Oh.
And in that presentation, you had a document, I believe, that was from the 1970s, that not in the one today, but the one that you gave last time with your year-end report. And it struck me because the argument's been made that TIF is only for blight. But the policy that we had in the 1970s looked pretty much identical for the why part of it that we do today, and that is to encourage something a little bit more elaborate, grander, bigger, more valuable than would otherwise have been forward. And that really, I kind of almost fell out of my chair when you said that, because the narrative has been, oh, well, TIF has been perverted from its original use. But in Edina, our original use was not, here is a rundown set of buildings where there's crime and graffiti and dangerous pits that people fall in, kind of things. It's, we have the opportunity to redevelop a piece of land. We're going to do something more ambitious, maybe that's the word, than would otherwise have been done because we have TIF available as a tool. And I was really surprised by that, and also kind of reassured that that has been the history of our city going back 50 years, like I said, to use it in that manner rather than, like I said, rundown buildings and blight. It's not a crime-fighting tool. It is a tool of ambition, really, that has been successful.
I apologize, I completely misunderstood your question. What you're referring to is, I think, the 1977 Southeast Edina Redevelopment Project Area Objectives and Goals. Yes, and one of the key goals in that, the fundamentals are connect neighborhoods with roads, sidewalks, and bike trails, affordable housing, modern utilities and things like that, and to deliver a higher caliber of construction than the marketplace. Marketplace might be aiming for a C. We're aiming for a A-, B+. A+ is even better, but and that is embodied in that document. And that was used as the guiding document for Edinburgh Park and that whole development, and for the entire Centennial Lakes, from the office to the multifamily to the retail to the park. There was a movie theater there for many years that's been replaced, I think, with a Whole Foods most recently. But there's been a lot of ways that has been delivered, and that was a benchmark of that initial goal, of that initial plan, and it's still one of the key objectives.
Okay, thank you.
And then briefly, regarding inflating land prices, that's one thing I'm always very cautious of, because if you do not check the land deal, you might unintentionally inflate land prices around you, and that hurts our redevelopment goals. So I've offered caution on this on several projects where I thought the land deal was a little bit too high. We always do check and we look at comps. We do our own check and we ask the developer to give us their comps, and then we do our own. I guess ask and verify. And in some cases, well, in all cases, I've been happy with the outcome. I will say the one project that I thought we might be in danger of inflating the land price was the Mason Green project. In order to have the seller sell that property rather than do whatever else he was going to do with it, the developer had to pay significantly higher than the assessed value. And that was my biggest caution on that project. In that case, I think the developer has done everything they said they would, and the outcomes have exceeded where we thought we would be. And so my caution, I'm glad that we considered it, but it has not resulted in an inflated value there. And then regarding using TIF for pooling, that's one of the options that is embodied in state law. In some of our TIF districts, we do include affordable housing. And if there's any funds that are not previously needed for paying off a developer note or city debt or interest or any of the city's administrative costs, we can choose to pool that for affordable housing. It's just one of the things that comes in the state law. We do that in some cases, but not all cases. I think we did, when we rewrote the policy, I think we did add a provision that said any excess left when the TIF is over shall be pooled. But it's something we opt into, and then it's always the board's discretion whether or not we want to do that. But as a policy, we do that because we've heard on many occasions it's very difficult to identify a source to fund affordable housing. We've had many discussions over the last several years about ways to fund it. Using pooled TIF is not always the most effective way, but it's the easiest way to get something started.
Terrific, thank you.
Mr. Risser.
I'm going to just acknowledge that I'm the one who's viewing TIF differently from other people, but with that, I do want to say I think there are things that we could do that would help build transparency. And when we do use TIF dollars for affordable housing, be it structural or programmatic, because we do it across the board, whether it's building new apartment units or providing down payment assistance, I think it's really important to have figures, for example, when we're investing TIF in apartments, what is the cost per square footage? What is that breakdown? And I think we really need to have that. That's basic. I am concerned about how affordable is defined. And, you know, I understand with our recent HEROES program, it's 110% AMI, which across Hennepin County, you know, you're looking at roughly 60% of the people contributing to something that is benefiting people who have maybe more than they do. And so it's an equity issue that I'm concerned about there. So I don't know if there's a way that we could put in more of an analysis about who is paying and who is not. The other thing, I think the way we're using TIF, and I really want to underscore that Commissioner Jackson and that dialogue about the origins of TIF in Edina, I think that was incredibly insightful because it really is not for blight. I have a little anecdote. I was in the car with my dad going down France Avenue and we went past the new Enclave building that is going up in Minneapolis. And my dad looked at it and he said, "That's great, it's gonna keep property taxes low." And I thought, you're right, Dad, it's not TIF'd. So I think there's benefits to TIF. My big concern is that it is so frequently combined with zoning. We rezone, and in the process of rezoning, it's usually going to PUD. That singular parcel is getting benefits that surrounding parcels do not. And so when we talk about what does TIF do to land prices and land costs and opportunities for development, if there's so much development that's concentrated on one specific site, you know, what does that do to the sites around it? And I haven't really had, and I don't know if we can actually answer that. So I'm not asking you to respond to that at 8:06 in the morning. I'm just speaking more than asking. And I was thinking that what you were looking for was questions that you weren't gonna respond to on the fly. That, I mean, which is good, you're doing that. But, you know, maybe these are things we wanna think about a little bit longer. I do think that often some members of the public feel they do not have much of a voice in terms of how TIF is used. And the process, we can have public hearings. I know Sandy Carlson came forward and requested that happened before we do any more investment in the proposed underpass. And I think it would be really good if that did happen, because a lot of people are really thinking about that project. And I think there needs to be an opportunity for people to participate before more investment is made on that. So it's the unspent TIF. And there's such a range. We look at our policy for TIF. It doesn't necessarily encompass the reality that it doesn't have to be economic development, that it can be down payment assistance. And so I don't know if we should be including that in our policy. I don't really want to go down that path because I kind of, I have a lot of concerns about using it in ways that don't pertain to construction. So those are my early morning after a late night ramblings. Take them. I really don't have any specific thing you need to respond to. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for those thoughts too. Yeah, should we have TIF as a tool in our toolbox? I think it seems like we uniformly think that we should. Some difference of opinion as to how it gets used. I think you've been a good steward of, during the time you've been here, of deciding, you and Stephanie, when it's potentially to be used. But I think all of us would like the timing of the discussion of the use of TIF to occur a little bit earlier, because it could, and it also goes that, the timing of it goes to this issue that Commissioner Brisser just raised, is that if you know there's TIF potentially coming at the time you're doing a potential zoning decision and you've got public hearings going on, then people can voice their opinions then at that point in time. We don't have to worry about thinking about subsequent public hearings that don't really fall in a process. So that's one possible solution there, I think. But the timing of the discussion of use of TIF has been something that's been of concern to me too, because I'd like to know, or it could, as you think about whether to rezone, for example, the fact that the developer or the project may need some TIF assistance and why, it'd be good to have that as part of the total package of consideration at the time you were contemplating rezoning. So, but from a general standpoint, we have differing opinions on this, but I feel like one of the big benefits of TIF is that it lets us accomplish long-term benefits for the city and build projects of higher value and increase the tax base to levels that would not otherwise achieve with normal organic growth over the life of a TIF district. And because we can think that way, and we've done some of these projects that, Macy's as an example, it might have been a $100 million project on there, now we got a $250 million project. Do we have to be patient until that TIF district ends? Yeah, we do. But it also takes a lot of pressure off the levy, because there's other things that we might want to be doing that could only be done by raising the levy that we're very cautious about doing. And so TIF gives us another tool to be able to use to avoid putting more pressure on our residents from a levy standpoint. And then on your slide 6, the question was, is city policy driving the need to use TIF more frequently? I personally don't think so. I think it's just the times we live in and the times that change as we go through life. There was a period of time where the developer was, when we were having an affordable housing requirement as part of a multifamily development, they were able to do those units in there themselves without the assistance of the city. Now we've gotten to the point where, because of the high costs of the things that you mentioned on slide 6, we've had to think about using TIF in a different way. We've had to make a bigger investment, and I think, to the point Member Risser was making, I think Commissioner Risser, My recollection is that we always look at the cost per door. You can look at it, I suppose, from a square footage standpoint, but we typically use that cost per door comparative, one project to another, to see internally whether it makes any sense, or to advise us, have you guys advise us as to whether it makes any sense, so that we can make a well-reasoned decision. So for me, it's stay the course, but look at that timing issue that Commissioner Agnew started out, that her conversations with, and just continue to be judicious in the use of TIF. But let's talk about it earlier. Commissioner Pierce.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I do think, so I hadn't heard before, so I appreciate your comment that without TIF in a particular instance would put more pressure on the levy. So I hadn't thought about that, but I think the way I internalize that, you're saying if there are projects that we want to get done, whether it's sidewalks or whatever, that we are going to do as a city, those things still have to be funded somehow. And so if you don't use TIF to do that, then we're raising the levy, right? So in principle, I get that. I think, so this is not just TIF comments, I should say. So I think having a bigger conversation of how do we strike the right balance so that we can have a sustainable levy. So both things can be true, right? So I think that, I think it's incumbent on us as well to figure out, and this is actually what I think my issue is, as we layer our policies on top of each other, they raise the costs of development, and then the developer has to close the gap, and they ask for TIF as part of that, closing the gap. And so the timing issue is important, but I kind of assume, anything that's bigger than 4 floors is going to ask for TIF. And so I'm actually surprised when someone doesn't, like Opus, say, we don't need TIF. Really? Oh, okay. I'm actually surprised by that. And so I think we have to look at the compounding effect of all of our policies. So when I asked Enclave that question, if you didn't get TIF for that development, what would change? And Mr. Brommer went through a whole list of, well, you're asking me to do this for affordable housing, you're asking me to do this for sustainability, you're asking me to do all these things. And so if I don't get TIF, he wasn't taking them all out, but it was a subset of what they would have done. And so I do think there's this broader conversation of our policies causing the costs to be higher, and we can make a decision that says, yeah, they are, but we want that for whatever reason, right? But at least then we're leaning into it from a transparency standpoint and a decision taken that that's what we're doing. So I think it's the compounding effect of our policies that are driving the costs, and TIF is just one of the ways that developers close the gap.
One thing I forgot to mention was I think you should continue this policy or strategy, and that is that pay-as-you-go note, where there's no risk on the city.
Yeah.
And the risk is on the developer to do what they said they were going to do for us to be able to get the things that we think are important in a project to enhance the value of the project and really the value of the town overall, the desirability of us as a place to live. Many of these projects where you've used TIF have done exactly that. They've taken us to another level and really has enhanced the city in addition to enhancing the project itself. So, Commissioner Jackson.
Yes, thank you. So as Commissioner Pierce was talking, I was thinking of that pyramid of discretion and how simple and easy it is to understand, this is where we are, this is how much discretion we have. Something similar to that of these are the city policies that are affecting this development, and just colorful, green, yellow, white, blue. That's what this is. This is the chunk of where it's going, or just even this is the stack of policies that we're looking at. So a simple graphic that we could understand, these are the things that we're asking the developer to do that are contributing to the cost. I think that might be just another way of thinking about it, because after a while the words start blending all together, but a simple picture would be helpful.
We can do that type of analysis, sure.
Yes, Commissioner Risser.
I do appreciate you on slide 6 having the Greater Southdale Area Design Guidelines. And it would also be interesting to find out from developers, at the very beginning stages, maybe even before they are understanding the desire we have for them to kind of carve it up into squares. What would they do if they didn't have to do that? And it's possible if they didn't have those restrictions, they could provide affordable housing a little bit more easily. I am really becoming more and more concerned that the guidelines are stymieing developers and really creating a challenge. And it would be, I keep looking back at the Hennepin County Library, which is so beautiful, and relieved that we didn't say, no, you must do what we said in our guidelines, because that would never happen. But what, you kind of wonder, what would you have built if you didn't have to do this? So.
Corollary to that one is, I've wondered about this, as you think about these projects that come forward, and they're at that very early stage, are you able to think about what the city would want out of a project, or is that something that evolves over time? Because it seems like it puts more pressure on our forward thinking at the front end of a project, and you and Stephanie are good at that. Your whole team is good at that in terms of thinking about what's the city want out of this. But sometimes I would guess that's a bit evolutionary. That as you go along and you're looking at a project, you're thinking, yeah, here's what we could do from a city standpoint. And so that kind of compounds a problem of knowing at the front end, that whole timing issue, and I don't know how to solve that problem, to have the vision you need to have when the developer first comes in or shortly after they come in and you start talking about a zoning change and what we'd like to see in a project. Because we don't know anything about it yet. And so we haven't been able to provide you with any input on what we'd like to see. So how do we solve that problem of us getting our vision to you earlier too, so that you know what we're thinking about?
Yeah, it's always a challenge, and redevelopment is always going to be an iterative process. Some developers are open to that. Others are completely opposed to it. Some developers walk in, they want to build this 5-story thing, and it has to be this shape with this many units, and it's this or nothing. A lot of those get turned down. But most developers walk in much more open-minded and much more flexible. So yeah, there definitely is an iterative process, but if we flip-flop the funding piece, and introduce that to you, to this board earlier in the process, we've at least alerted you that there's a cost consequence for some of these changes. For example, the developer might say that he needs 6 stories to make the project pencil. And some people might say, well, no, it has to only be 4 stories. Well, it could be 4 stories if the city wants to kick in several $1 million to make the project pencil. There's a cost-benefit type of conversation that can happen. So I think that iterative process frankly, it works really well with community input, planning commission input, city council input, staff input. But I think if we simply interject the conversation about cost earlier, not that that should change a planning commissioner or a city council member's decision about zoning, but as you make a final decision about the bigger picture project, knowing that cost is a factor, I think is vital. We've brought that to you, but we can bring it to you earlier in the scenario.
Okay. Commissioner.
So I want to respond to Commissioner Risser's question. I talked to someone who is formerly a developer, and she mentioned that one of the big costs for a building is the HVAC system. And so if you were to ask a developer on a big lot, not subdividing it, they would like to consolidate the HVAC system. They would like surface parking instead of buried parking. You know, the cost is exponentially higher to bury the parking. And a surface lot is the cheapest way. So if you were to ask the developer, get rid of the subdivision, and they're looking at maximizing the profit, they're going to have a big parking lot and one big, massive building. That's the default for using land because it makes the most money at the least cost. And so I think if we want to incorporate the idea of walkability to bring the buildings forward into the to the France Avenue or whatever we are and sort of hide the parking, those are things that are going to cost the developer money. But I think that we just have to know in the back of our heads, the two biggest costs are making multiple buildings instead of one, and surface parking versus a ramp or even more expensive buried parking. So those are things right away that would probably go away if we ask the developer, you know, what's going to cost you money. So just to put those facts out there.
All right. We've got some other, I think we're way behind schedule, like a half hour. Anyway, so thank you for that. And Manager Neal, you're taking the next matter, or do you want Bill to take it?
Bill's going to do this, please.
Yeah, and this is just a quick one. So under the executive director's report, just to update, we are at the point where we're ready to issue the certificate of completion for one of the Spark grants, or the Spark loans, I'm sorry. This is the one, we entered into this contract in 2023. If they were easy, they would have been done a long time ago. But this is the underground, the basement bar restaurant with the music club at 50th and France. That is now open for business, and it's been open for a little while. But I went through all their numbers, went through their paperwork. They met the obligations in the agreement, and we're ready to issue the certificate of completion, which means that then I'll submit a check request to finance, and we'll issue them the loan. So I just wanted to have that on your radar. And we followed our typical policy: enter into an agreement. The developer does what they say they're going to do, and then we follow through on our end and issue them that forgivable loan. So that's my only report. Really, no need for action. It's just to keep you up to date.
Okay. What are they calling the place?
Oh, it's called Noma Hi-Fi Lounge. And it's right next to Pajarito, across from the Carnival Bar, next to Harriet and Alice at 50th and France.
Okay.
The doorway is right by Carnival, in that alleyway right by the plaza.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's pretty nice. Check it out.
Yeah. All right, thanks for that. Any comments from HRA members? Executive Director? Commissioner Risser?
Just a thought, and this has to do with the LAHA money that we awarded several months ago. With the demand or the need for rental assistance, Director Hawkinson, if there was any money that was not spent on naturally occurring affordable housing, I'm wondering if there was any that didn't go to that could possibly be shifted to rental assistance. It may already be tied up. And I'm sorry to ask, and you don't have to answer right now. It could be at our
I have an answer. if
Oh,
you want.
okay.
The $2025 have already been committed in full. However, We do know that we are getting 2026 dollars in July. So since not all the 2025 dollars have gone out the door yet, it takes a while to spend down that money. I was going to seek authority from you to pre-authorize 2026 dollars using what's in our coffers now and backfilling it once we get the new dollars. Veep still has emergency rental assistance remaining. They have enough to get through the next couple months. But that is something that I want to explore with you is pre-approval, a forward approval.
Oh, good. Good question. Good. Thanks for being anticipatory on that. Okay. So we got a little more work to do on another matter here. So is there a motion to adjourn the HRA meeting this 5th day of February 2026?
So moved.
Second.
You got a motion by Commissioner Agnew, second by Commissioner Pierce to adjourn the meeting of the HRA this Thursday, February 5th, 2026 at 8:27 a.m. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adjournment say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried. HRA stands adjourned.